Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Palaniuk. I am with the Google News Initiative, and I cover what we call news industry relations. But what that basically ends up meaning is that I work with news industry associations in the U.S. to help essentially take advantage of all the programs and tools and resources that Google and the Google News Initiative has already sort of created and bring them to more local news publishers. One of the best ways to do that is by partnering with associations like INN, but then also creating sort of custom programs and opportunities that are unique to the needs of association members like INN in the nonprofit news space. So thank you all again for joining. And Ashley, if you want to give a quick overview.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley. I'm the partnerships manager for the US and the News Lab. I do a lot of work with Casey. I do a lot of work with newsrooms on training, misinformation programs, media literacy programs, and like Casey, doing sort of custom programs with newsrooms as well. And I'm on the project team for the News Equity Fund.
Yes, so that is why we are here. I'm going to give a quick overview of the News Equity Fund. I think most of you are already familiar with it, but our whole purpose here is to answer any questions that are coming up, because I'm certain there are some. So, because especially since this is kind of new for us, we've never launched News Equity Fund before. So, is it presenting?
Ashley,
I wasn't able to. I had it presented, but then I couldn't unmute myself.
I got it.
Sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. We all,
but yeah,
you know, we're all new to this pandemic thing, right? We haven't done this before.
Are we? That's generous of you.
Give me 1 minute and I'll have it fired up.
No worries. So the News Equity Fund we announced in June, I think June 22nd. We actually initially sort of previewed it in November, but because this is really sort of a new initiative and something that the team was really was excited about, but also we're trying to coordinate at a global level, we sort of got it out the door last month, and I think thankfully it should be a pretty easy application process. So shouldn't take too long. But the goal of it is really at a global level to support and strengthen inclusion and equity, as well as empower a diverse local news ecosystem. Obviously, diversity means something different in the US than it might in Mexico, than it might in Japan. And so keeping an eye to sort of empower it, providing an opportunity for a global audience, but empowering regional audiences to sort of know best what that means. All of the selection criteria and sort of decisions on the funding will be happening at the local level, which I think is great for us here in the US and North America. So basically, I guess what it is a fund, and it is not unlike, I think probably some of you have applied to our innovation challenges in the past that are very focused on a specific project. Or a program to launch, and funding that the Google News Initiative provides is for that specific project. This is much more akin to truly sort of supporting and lifting up diverse news organizations and those that are diverse owned, as well as serve primarily diverse and underrepresented audiences. I do have a lot of eligibility criteria, but should I on the screen? But are you presenting?
Give me 1 second. Sorry, G Suite is being slow for me, so
it's cool.
It is what it is. So
this is cool. I'm just gonna do it all verbally, and then at some point, once you get those slides,
I'll catch up to you.
Go for it. Go for it. So, eligibility criteria. Actually, to put this in a frame of reference and timeline, I'll say this first, that the application closes July 21st. So you still have a fair amount of time to get your application in if you have not already, which is great. And again, I don't think the application should take you too long. So we have sort of 5 main points for eligibility criteria. All of this is on our website. We also have an email address that you can always email with any one-off questions should you have them, that are all sort of linked at the back of this presentation. But the first eligibility criteria is that this is for small and medium-sized news organizations producing original news for underrepresented audiences. And I think the key there is small and medium-sized, as well as original reporting, original journalism, and then again, underrepresented audiences. Our definition of small to medium-sized organizations is between 1 and 50 full-time employees. So technically, this is something different than we've done in a lot of other programs too. And I was telling Jonathan about it, I guess a week or two ago, but technically, if you are a news organization of 1, which I don't think is necessarily applicable to most INN members, but you never know. If you are incorporated as a sort of your own company institution, and we have very specific sort of guidelines about what that means in our FAQs. But if you are sort of a single full-time employee of your own business, you are also eligible to apply for this. The other criteria. Jonathan,
you have slides.
Amazing. We have slides. Thank you. Second, you have to be, or you can be, a for-profit, nonprofit, traditional news organization, digital native, newsletters, podcasts, radio, TV broadcasters, news associations. Our posture here is to be as inclusive as possible. And if you, again, have any very specific questions about that, please email, or actually we're here and we'll do our best to answer. A key here too is that you need to have had a verifiable digital presence. Again, don't think this will be any kind of issue for INN members, but verifiable digital news presence in full operation for at least 12 months. And that's just to essentially establish credibility and more just sort of history and pattern that you didn't just start this up right now. Not that we think that you did. And then, as with all of our work at the GNI, has to have a core focus on news, not entertainment, sports, things like that. We exist to really support that core news and want to do so as much as possible. Next slide, please, which I will get into selection process. So this is, as I said, this is a regional process. Each of the regions, global regions, have a slightly different process, and it's designed that way so that we can sort of know the unique needs and quirks of our communities that we're partnering with. But the initial selection criteria for the applicants will take place by Google staff who work in the news industry based off of the criteria that I just shared. And then we'll also be working with third parties to essentially validate and confirm our selections. And a lot of this, I don't want to say is a guessing game. It's not a guessing game, but because we are trying to make this an open and inclusive process, we don't have a limit on the number of applications that we're accepting or things like that. So I think a lot of the process will be determined on how many people are end up applying. And then from there, once we get to our selection list, we'll contact the applicants who are being accepted via email, and we'll ask them to sign a funding agreement. I think probably many of you have signed those in the past. They're just sort of a standard agreement with us, very automated. And then from there, we'll disperse the funds in a single disbursement. Again, all of that will happen by email, and check your spam folder, I guess. And then finally, the amounts that we are funding, again, are not necessarily determined by a specific project like an innovation challenge. We're basing the funding amounts actually more on the size of your organization. So that 1 to 50 person full-time employment or employee range will really be sort of a key factor in the amount of funding that we're able to disperse, as well as how many applicants we receive. All right, wrapping up into timeline, my next slide. Applications, as I said, opened on June 22nd. They'll stay open until July 21st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. I believe I have to triple check that, but I believe it's Eastern. But always don't wait to the last second. Get in at least on the 20th. And then because we don't know the full scope of how many applications we'll get, we're giving ourselves a little bit of leeway in sort of determining who will receive the funding. So we've given us sort of a wide window. So you will receive an email notification if you've been, if your application has been accepted by December 2022. So I think that's the bulk of it. The next slide I have, there's a custom email address, specifically if you have questions that Ashley and I are not able to answer or that pop up while you're going through the application process. We will do our best to get you answers for sure. I actually have a question from Jonathan that is still outstanding about google.org, but it's on my list. But with that, yeah, we are really here to answer any of your questions. So I know I've been seeing lots of chats going on, and I'm assuming
Ashley's been doing a great job of answering questions. Ashley's on fire.
Can I just
fantastic? It's great to have both of us. But yeah, I mean, please fire away. And I don't know if there's the ability to like raise hands or just
if people would like to unmute and they raise their hand, I can certainly allow people to talk. So if you have a question that would be easier to ask verbally, feel free to raise your hand and we can call on people. But Ashley, go ahead.
So just to start off the bat, because we're getting this question a lot about the funding amount, we are not able to tell you the ranges of the funding amount. It really is going to depend on the newsroom size, your newsroom size, and the total number of applications we receive. It's a global program. So I'm sorry for that question, but we really can't answer it because we do not know. As for the question on how much money can I request, there's nowhere on the application that asks for an amount to be requested. So there's no need to request 10K or 15K for a specific project. That's not, it's not like the Innovation Challenge where it's per project. Now I see some questions about the terms and conditions about editorial expenses. So editorial expenses are permitted, meaning like, you need to hire journalists, you need to, anything like that. When we say that editorial expenses are not permitted in the terms and conditions, it's to say like paying someone directly to write a specific op-ed for your site or something like that. But editorial expenses, when it's like hiring a journalist, the travel for a journalist, equipment a journalist may need, those are fine. Sorry, let me just mute myself quickly over here. Hold on. Okay. There was another question. So in the terms and conditions, another area of confusion was the part about a project, something you might be familiar with if the Innovation Challenge is that you apply for a specific amount for a specific project. In terms of the News Equity Fund, project simply means what you're using the funds for. So if you write, there's a question on the application that says, please briefly explain how this funding will help you serve your community and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the news ecosystem. So you can say we're using this money to hire freelance journalists for X amount of time. We're using this money to hire journalists. We're using this money for new equipment, for a new website, to pay the rent on our building of our news website. Whatever it may be, that's what it means. K. Rambo, no, funding can be used for freelancers or contract reporters. That's under editorial expenses. That is fine.
We have a couple of people who've raised their hands. Do you want me to have them talk, or do you want to take any more questions from the chat real quick?
Yes, you can people who raised their
Okay.
hands.
So Susan Hess, we're coming to you. Susan, you
Yeah,
are
I just
now.
unmuted. Yeah,
Yep,
I just
go ahead.
unmuted. Thank you. Thanks everybody for this opportunity. So we serve a very rural population. Is that considered under the equity umbrella?
Yes. I put this in the chat, and this is also on the page, but diversity means something different everywhere, especially globally. Diversity, geographic location, immigration status, language, race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, veteran status, disability, class, caste, age, race, religion, those all fall under diversity. So that would work as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Susan, I'm putting you back on mute, but feel free to raise your hand again.
And just to quickly answer the question, pretty much the only thing that funding can't be used for is our legal expenses. So I see a lot of questions, is X eligible, this, if it's related to the news operation and furthering the news operation and journalism, if it's not like paying for legal expenses, it's okay.
All right, Kathy Jennings is here, and then maybe Kathy, you can ask your question, and then Casey, I saw you were trying to get in here, so I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Thanks. We operate a street paper covering social justice issues, specifically issues affecting people experiencing homelessness in Nashville. And I noticed on the restrictions, it's 4.2 on the document, the terms and conditions, it says a restriction is any project that is already launched or live at the time the application is submitted. So that's what led me to go, like, would it have to be a new journalist we're hiring, or could it be an existing one that we're just taking over the salary, or, yeah.
So I understand, yeah, the terms and conditions are confusing, but for legal reasons, we have to phrase it like that. That is allowed. This is not a project-based program, it's an eligibility-based program. So you don't have to worry about the project already being in.
Can I say thank you?
Yeah.
Because, we always have to like come up with a new project, and it's like, we really just need money to keep going. Thank you.
Yes, so that is absolutely one of the things that we thought of when we were designing this program, that newsrooms simply need just funds to further their operation. It doesn't always have to be related to a new project. There's a lot of great things going on already. So yeah, so I understand the terms and conditions. It's a little confusing, but for legal reasons, we have to phrase it that way, because otherwise it could be considered like a gift. It's very complicated, but rest assured, you do not need another project.
All right, Kathy, I'm putting you back on mute and sending you back. Casey, go ahead.
Thank you. My only, and this was sort of a question, I don't know if it's a question for Ashley, but there is under section 4.2 restrictions in the terms and condition. It says that the project cannot upgrade a legacy publishing system. And I only call that out because I see that there are some questions in the chat about editorial projects not projects, products, like new product development and things like that. So would you mind sharing a little bit about sort of that specifically, and whether the funds can be used for product development? Because in my mind, I read an upgrade to a legacy publishing system as like a CMS. And so can the funding be used to upgrade your CMS?
So I'm actually going to go back and I will have to follow up with that, because I'm unsure. From everything we've discussed with legal, product development for upgrading your CMS, upgrading your website should fall under editorial expenses and be okay. But I want to just follow up with the legal team first before I give a definitive answer with that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to everyone if that's a non-answer, but I also saw that flag reading through and I was like, wait, I don't know the answer to this. And so that's great. We'd rather give you the correct information than not. So I'll follow up with Jonathan on that.
So a couple of questions that I'm going to call, and Casey, I think this is one that maybe still that I asked you that you may still be having your but I'm just going to confirm that we're talking about the same question that you don't have a definitive answer on whether organizations with fiscal sponsors can apply or how that would be considered.
Let me triple
Can you
check.
explain what that means by fiscal
Yeah.
sponsors?
So, and this, I suspect you all are going to say it's fine because fiscal sponsor generally tends to be most interested to foundations. But when an organization has a fiscal sponsor, they exist as, well, in most cases, as an incorporated business in their own right. But they have either not yet started or have not yet completed the process of getting a 501c3 determination letter from the IRS. So in order to accept tax deductible gifts, in order to accept funds from some foundations, they contract with an organization that has an existing 501c3 status, like INN. We fiscally sponsor between 20 and 30 organizations at any time in order to be able to accept those gifts as tax deductible. So I don't know if that's enough, if you have more questions, but that's the general.
That should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the other question that I was going to surface is, in the terms and conditions, I see that you have to be able to begin the project within 30 days. So if you want to use the funds to hire a journalist, we would need to promote the person, do interviews, make an offer, etc. Or is it something that you maybe just have to start the process of hiring within 30 days? How would you
kind of start the process? And again, that's like one of those vague legal things. We're not going to be, and this really sounds unprofessional, but we're not going to be like breathing down people's neck, be like, it's 30 days, you didn't hire someone. It's more of like, that's what you're using the funds for. The recipients will have to fill out like a survey at the beginning and in a few months, just to kind of like an innovation challenge where we check in and see where your project is. Like if you use the money to upgrade your system or your website, we just want to see just like an update for that, and not to like be breathing down anyone's neck, but we want to see how this has been, the funds were used to help your newsroom.
Okay. Kay Rambo, go ahead, and then I'm gonna allow Kay Rambo to talk because she wants to unmute. So go ahead and answer that, and then we'll have Kay talk.
So one of the restrictions is training. Yes, that is not allowed. Legal expenses, training, meaning like hiring someone to come in and train, those are not eligible expenses.
Kay Rambo. I think you need to yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. Thanks y'all for being here today. I appreciate it. So I edit a street paper in Portland, Oregon called Street Roots, and our coverage is focused exclusively on inequity. We suspect that a substantial portion of our readership are folks from socially and economically privileged backgrounds. So I guess when discussing our audiences and whether or not they're underrepresented, is that based mostly on our coverage, or is there some other, criteria that we're looking for, I guess, to prove that we fit that?
It would be your coverage. And I think that since you said you cover inequity and things like that in the application, we do ask for links to a couple articles that demonstrate the audience you cover or the type of content you do. So that'll be eligible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Kay, sending you back. All right, so
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read through and see if I've missed.
I know, I was, so was I. I was feverishly looking for questions we hadn't answered. I think we've gotten everything that we have so far. So if we have, Ashley, if you don't see anything. Okay.
If we receive GNI funds for an equity-focused partnership initiative, can we submit an application on behalf of the partnership, or would it be better for the members to submit separately? Can you elaborate? Is this like a collaborative project? Newsrooms? If that's the case, I would suggest each newsroom, if eligible to apply for funds. Again, this isn't a project-based program, so you couldn't submit an application based on like a project. It has to be like a newsroom submitting a project themselves. Can we use the funds in Google products to I'm not sure. Can you elaborate on that? Like to purchase something Google related? Like I'm not
That cloud credits and things like that.
I'm sure that would be fine, but again, that's another one I'm going to follow up
Yeah.
with just to clarify. There was another one, sorry. If your publication serves a general audience but works to increase coverage of underserved populations and has a reporter on that, does that qualify? My answer to this would be this fund is really for newsrooms that have been covering underrepresented audiences, that this is kind of a part of what they've been doing. If you do have a reporter who has been working and sort of building this audience over time, if you can submit articles that show that this is actually kind of like the audience you cover. But again, we really want this to be for newsrooms that have been kind of covering this, not just for a project or just recently started, but I would suggest you apply so we can view your application. It's hard to kind of make that judgment without an application. There was a couple others, sorry.
There was one specifically asking about whether people who are serving time would be considered an underserved audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was another question in the Q&A, but I think we might have answered that.
I think you got it. All the questions that came in the Q&A, I've only been getting rid of as they've been answered. So I think you're good there.
Yeah, so this is just, the application's very, very simple. And I know it seems confusing that it's not a project-based program. It really is just based on eligibility. We really wanted to kind of break down the barriers of funding. We didn't want people to have to jump through hoops that are, you're doing the work. We want you just to continue doing the work. So I know the terms and conditions can be a little confusing, but editorial expenses, I want to reiterate, like hiring a journalist, travel for journalists, equipment for journalists, those are all eligible.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? This is your best chance to have the GNI team on the hot seat to answer it. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of the email address. So any chance there, Casey?
On email too, though. So if you do have a question, feel free to email.
All right, Karen Gadbois from New Orleans, you are now able to ask your question.
Okay, now don't laugh, but I can't locate the link for the application.
No problem. I can copy it in again. It's in the chat. I just put it in the chat again.
Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
No worries.
All right. Okay. Then I think with that, you all have the email address. If you come up with other questions, Casey or Ashley, can you just remind folks of when the deadline is again?
Yes, the deadline is, let me just make sure I have the right date, is July 21st at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time.
So and I was on the East Coast, you get a little bit into the 22nd if you really want to take all your minutes.
Yeah, but it's a very, very quick application. It honestly shouldn't take more than half hour, and I think that's a lot of time for it. It's very straightforward. So I really suggest applying as soon as possible so you don't forget and then you're not scrambling the last moment, and just want to give you time to get any of your questions answered as well.
Yeah, Ron
asks, yeah, go ahead.
My parting words of advice would be orient towards applying versus not applying.
Yeah.
It can't hurt.
And absolutely, because obviously we have to have some parameters because it can't just be an open program. But I understand there are some edge cases and there's some gray area when it comes to certain things, when it comes to well, we cover this audience, is that eligible? My advice would be just to apply. It's better to apply and then, you unfortunately get rejected than to not apply and you could have gotten funding. So just apply for sure.
Great. Well, Casey, Ashley, it's always great to see you. Thank you for coming up. Cynthia, you're sliding in under the wire. All right. Cynthia, go ahead, ask your question.
Hey, better late than never, right? So I had a question about the training restriction. So we have a program that isn't really training our newsroom. It's a program to train community members to be journalists with us. So it's as a way to reach audiences that have been disconnected from the media in Cleveland, Ohio.
I think
It's a
that would
really
definitely
popular
be
program.
eligible. I think that would be eligible. I think when we refer to training, it's more so like coming in, training your journalists to do something else, or paying for like a school, like a course or something like that. But
Okay.
it seems like a very community journalism focused program. So I
Yeah.
do believe that would be eligible. I would definitely apply. That's really cool, actually.
All right. Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm going to call this a webinar for all the members. Thank you for being here. If you haven't entered the Nonprofit News Awards, get those in. If you haven't filled out the compensation study, get that in. But if you need anything, have any questions, you know how to reach the Google team. And I'm Jonathan at inn.org. And if you don't know how to reach me, I don't know how that happened, but I'm sorry. And I encourage you to email me if you need anything. So Team Google, thank you. INN members, thank you so much. And have a great rest of your day, everybody.
You too.
Thank you all. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, guys. Take care.